Okay, you got a notification that says Youri's recording the call.
Yes.
Fantastic. Well, hello everyone. Welcome to another edition of 1+1, your place for inconvenient truth-telling and myth-busting. On the program this afternoon, or tonight, whenever people decide to watch this, we are rejoined by our returning champion, the brilliant Boyan Stanislavski, co-founder and editor-in-chief of the Barricade, which is a pan-Eastern European, independent pan-Eastern European news outlet which covers Eastern European affairs and international affairs, always from a critical left perspective. And yes, so this is our all things Eastern European edition and our all things post-communism, former communist, and current communist states. And yeah, so first off, Boyan, thank you so much for coming back on the program. It's an honor to have you back.
Right, it's an honor and a pleasure to be on 1+1, Youri. Thanks for having me.
Likewise, it's been too long. And Boyan, so we're a bit strict for time today. So I wanted to talk mostly about Bulgaria. But before we get to Bulgarian affairs, let's talk about the country that you're currently based in, which is Poland. So Boyan, explain to our audience what is currently happening in Poland. Do you have elections coming up? And is former Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk, who was the bootlicker for the European Union for a while, is he set to make a comeback and end the reign of terror that is the Catholic fundamentalist party of law and justice? So briefly respond to that before I ask a follow-up question to that.
Right. So, well, first of all, I want to state that there is no Catholic reign of terror. There are many Catholic fundamentalist organizations, and there are Catholic fundamentalist circles within the Law and Justice Party, which is a party that I dislike. And I've expressed that many times in your programs and in our podcasts on the Barricades and, wherever I go. But I think we should not go over the top, and we should be as serious as possible about the situation in Poland, because it is serious for many reasons, international and domestic. And domestically speaking, law and justice, there are many, as I said, Catholic fundamentalist organizations, and they are trying to make the life of many social groups they dislike difficult. But it's not really the priority of the government. The government has different priorities, one of which is remaining in power and trying to continue this effective flirting with the large portion of the Polish population, the large portion of the Polish public, and actually a large portion of the Polish working class, which is how they still remain in power, and which is how they won the last 8 rounds of various elections: municipal, European, parliamentary, presidential, what have you. I mean, so that's something. That's a kind of political strength, and that's a kind of political traction that they've developed over the last 8 years, since 2015. That takes someone much more capable and much more competent and much more innovatively thinking, I would say, than Donald Tusk. Donald Tusk is a seasoned Polish politician, but he will never be able, I think, to effectively confront law and justice. Law and justice will remain in power for as long as the leadership of law and justice continues this process of, as I described it, flirting with the Polish public, giving them something, and cultivating this gap between the Polish opposition and the Polish currently ruling establishment. Now, there are many layers of differences here, but I think what is most important, which is not understood in the West, and this is why we get moronic articles in the Guardian or the Washington Post or the New York Times, where they really think that the Polish liberal opposition their victory is right around the corner, and they have such a major that the support for them is so large, so great, and it's only through the kind of dictatorial repressive measures that are taken by Kaczynski that they cannot win. Well, that's not the case. They are winning Law and Justice, I mean, the right-wingers, Catholic fundamentalists, whatever you want to call them, right? They keep winning because they keep gaining increasing support. It's not like the increase is not great, okay? It's not like you can see that they get more and more votes, like with every rounds of elections, in a sense that 5% more, 10% more, something. No, it's not like that. But at every round of elections, they get like 1% more, 2% more, like 1% and a half. Sometimes they lose a little bit, but they still remain a majority. And why is that? It's very, very important. And that's something that cannot be confronted by the Civic Platform, which is the party of Donald Tusk, or the Civic Coalition, because now it's the Civic Platform and some satellite parties. Now, yes?
Very important to ask then, if I mean, the Civic Party of Donald Tusk. I mean, it's always funny how politicians who it's always funny how politicians, it could be Guy Verhofstadt of the country I'm based in, Belgium. It could be somebody like Barroso, former Prime Minister of Portugal, or somebody like Donald Tusk, former Prime Minister of Poland. It's always funny how when they were all in government, they all introduced a form of endless austerity after another. Tusk himself is also, for the people who say that Law and Justice, oh my gosh, they're so socially regressive and they're so fiscally conservative. You could argue that Tusk was also the same thing. He also expressed that he's against abortion, stuff like that. So
yeah, of course.
So for our audience, and briefly though, because I do want to talk about Bulgaria, is it safe to say that both Law and Justice and the Civic Party are both very much fiscally conservative and socially conservative with Eastern European characteristics, with Polish characteristics?
Yeah, of course. So first of all, that's correct. I mean, Law and Justice and the Civic Platform, the plan, in the beginning of this century, like in 2005, if I remember correctly, or 2004, the plan was that they will rule together. They will form a grand coalition against what they used to still call at the time post-communist parties. One post-communist party, really, which at the time was the Democratic Left Alliance, which formerly used to be the Polish United Workers' Party that used to rule before 1989. But that's a long story. Now, they wanted to rule together. It's only in 2005 that Kaczynski, the leader of the Law and Justice Party, actually noticed that they can actually have it all. And they screwed over the Civic Platform at the time. And this is the point of this great decoupling between them. I mean, they really are very similar in many programmatic aspects. It's just that they hate each other because Kaczynski screwed over Donald Tusk and his friends and took everything for himself in 2005. And this is why they've actually, gone rogue against each other. I mean, that's very simple, and that really has to do with such petty things. Okay, so don't buy that. Don't buy that they have different ideas and stuff.
It's not good for the public, but I always love seeing two rival oligarchs, two rival right wingers, duking it out because me, as a guy who loves, political philosophy and stuff like that, I just look at the two parties and go, what's the difference? Why are you guys like performing this ridiculous political theater?
But here it is. And I'd like to finish my thought from before because I think it's very important to understand the situation in Poland now. The origin of their hostilities is the fact that they kind of this quarrel around election time in 2005. But then, what Law and Justice discovered is that they will not be supported by anyone from abroad, and that they will not be getting any support from exactly the EU or specifically Germany, because Germany prefers Donald Tusk. And Germany was perfectly happy to support, for example, a grand coalition. But, they want to have their men, people whom they can trust, like Donald Tusk, for example, right? And this is, again, a long story of connections between Berlin and Warsaw, and particularly the party of Donald Tusk. Donald Tusk has been in the Polish politics since 1989 basically, and even a little earlier than that to some extent. So this is very important, and it led to Law and Justice transforming itself from this regular normal quote unquote party in Poland, which relies mostly on connections from abroad and support from different political clans which have global meaning and global role. What they were able to do is they were able to convince the wing of the American ruling class that supported Donald Trump back in 2016, 2015 to support them. And they did get that support, and they still enjoy the support of some people who are linked to Donald Trump, some people who have changed camps since then, some people who are, in the kind of hawkish, wing of the Democratic Party. It's a very strange conglomeration of who supports them in America, but they do have a lot of support. And that's mostly because they are so fervently hostile to Russia, and they are so welcoming to American imperialism. And again, this could be a long story, and there are many interesting aspects of it. We don't have the time to discuss it now. But apart from this, it's not much, right? Because America is like halfway around the world, and they cannot support them directly here, whereas the European Union is right across the border, like 400 kilometers from Warsaw to the west, probably even less so. So it's they had to be able to base themselves on some very important factor that could not be influenced by the European Union here at home, which is why they started developing certain mechanisms in order, and I repeat that, flirt with the Polish working class, flirt with the Polish masses. And some say, and that's by the way the narrative that you can also read in The Guardian, they take it straight from Donald Tusk's propaganda agitation books or notes, whatever they have, is like that Law and Justice is corrupting the Polish nation, corrupting the Polish people by giving them social benefits. And that's not true. I mean, fact of the matter is that some people do favor Law and Justice because they can definitely get some money, because if they have, like, I don't know, 5 children or something, then they can definitely count on some state assistance now, and that's important. But mostly people vote for Law and Justice because what they see in those social transfers, money transfers, in those actions on the part of Law and Justice supporting the poor, what they see this is just the currency. I mean, the zlotys that they give, Polish zloty is the currency of Poland. That's just, financial things. But what is really behind it is the question of dignity. And that's something that the Civic Platform will never understand. What the main message that Law and Justice conveys through those actions, but many other actions as well, I could talk about that for hours, is they convey the message of you deserve it. You should be supported. You mean a lot, despite the fact that you don't speak foreign languages, despite the fact that you don't work for corporate, foreign entities, despite the fact that you don't wear a suit and tie to your work, despite the fact that you go to church every Sunday and you pray, despite the fact that you're against abortion, despite the fact that you might not accept gay marriage or, gay people or something like that. All those things doesn't matter. You are the salt of this of this earth. You work hard for the well-being of your compatriots and so on and so forth, and we owe you the support, especially for families with children and so on and so forth. So they are very effective in it, and this is something, and this is the last sentence. This is something that the Civic Platform, Donald Tusk's party, will never be able to exercise because they don't know how to go about it. They don't have any base. They don't know how to build it.
That's what I was saying earlier, that so many politicians who leave office very unpopular and whatnot, and then somebody like Donald Tusk, who I would even sort of consider him far right, fiscally conservative and socially conservative. They then go to the European Union, which has done a brilliant job. My hat to the European Union. The European Union has done a very brilliant job of I mean, their PR system is that the European Union, we're the bastion of liberal democracy, and we're socially liberal, and we're acceptance of women, LGBTQIA plus people, people of color, yada yada yada, and stuff like that. So Tusk, when the whole Brexit referendum was happening, he really did, portray himself as this kind of liberal person, not left, but definitely a liberal person. To which when I started to do my research on Polish affairs and Polish politics, I just thought that was mildly amusing. That like, what, the guy's against like reproductive rights, and the guy also kind of like played footsie with xenophobia, and now he's like no, positioning himself on the liberal spectrum when it came to the whole Brexit.
No, but like, to be completely fair, I think that Donald Tusk himself is a genuine liberal Democrat in the Western sense. The question is, the thing is that he leans towards conservatism and conservative concepts because he understands that it's very difficult to actually exercise any type of political discourse within the Polish public, within the active part of the Polish society. When you go openly, when you openly stand for abortion or for, things which are associated with liberal, with liberal politics, which it doesn't have to be that way. I mean, there are many conservative people in Poland who support the right to abortion. There are many conservative people which support things which, are often interpreted as part of the liberal spectrum. But if you present it differently, not as liberalism, which most people in Eastern Europe today consider to be, an illness of the mind rather than anything politically acceptable for them. But if you present it differently, they will mostly agree. So I think that Donald Tusk has made some very bad conclusions on the basis of correct observations. Like, he observes the Polish society and he sees that, the kind of open pro-abortion, open pro-gay things, it doesn't work here. So instead of trying to find a tactic of how to actually put it in his own program, how to actually be able to present it to the public, then he just gave it up. And he said, oh, no, we're not going to do this. We're not going to do that. And, my mother, he actually recently said that my mother, when she brought the bread to the table, she would also always do the kind of cross sign over. Yeah. So he's really, he's a very confused person. And I don't think he's ideologically trained in any way. Donald Tusk is 110% PR. And all advices that he gets, if he gets any, he gets it from the PR people. So, when you don't analyze things politically, and you only base yourself on the kind of, the current moment of reception of things, then you will always end up in a kind of, disadvantaged position, I would say.
Okay, and that I'll have to have you back on to do an
absolutely always
all things Poland episode. And if people are interested, they actually should watch one of my favorite interviews I did with Boyan, where we talked about Polish history, and so we'll do a special all things Poland. But very briefly, there were several strikes that took place in Poland related to public transportation workers. Can you speak to this? Any victories for the workers? Because I heard from your colleague Malgorzata Figat when she was on the program several months ago that Solidarity tried to largely stop the workers from striking. Talk about that briefly before we get to Bulgaria.
Right. So there's no, I don't think there's much to talk about, honestly. I mean, the strike that you're referring to, it took place months ago, and it was an interesting attempt on the part of one of the small but very active organizations within the Polish. It's called All Poland Trade Union Alliance. Okay, this is the kind of, the Polish version of the TUC, of the British TUC. So they've actually gone quite far, because it's extremely difficult, the procedures to organize a legal strike in Poland. Yeah. They are very rigid, and it's kind of whoa. To get to a point where you can actually strike, so they not only did they get to that point, but they've also organized it in a very extravagant and courageous manner. there's no time to get into the details, but they decided to go, full steam ahead at a few points of attack. And even myself at the time, and I'm very much in favor of such experiments, I thought it's a risky move, okay? And they've started collecting money in order to support those workers, because obviously the management of the company, together with some strikebreakers from the Solidarity, whatever trade union, they were acting against the striking workers, okay? And they were hoping that if they let the strikers strike for like a few weeks and then few months, then they will not be able to simply survive, because in Poland you don't get paid for the days that when you're on strike. So they launched a public collection of money, right? And it turned out that it was enough. I mean, they barely were able to actually get to a point when their expectations. They did not collect. In other words, they did not expect. They did not collect as much money as they expected, but it was enough to actually drag the strike long enough for the owner of that company to the bus production company, assembling plant, to actually back down, and they had to sign an agreement which was again below the expectations of the workers, but it was still acceptable, I would say. So the strike was an interesting experiment, but the problem with the strike is that most of the workers, according to what I know, they don't consider it a great victory, but rather some kind of trauma for them that they actually had to go on strike. So obviously there are elements that I'm not aware of, because since for the last 10 years, I have not been so close with the Polish labor movement, and the strike also was taking place in a very distant city from where I live. I'm based in Warsaw. So I wasn't able to look at it all, but the point is that, okay, we've had a strike, we've had a pay rise, we've had, a few points that the labor movement can be proud of, but, the way it was presented by many leftists in Poland, that now there's going to be this great wave of strikes all over, the major industrial centers, I think it was over the top, and I think it still is. And I think we have to really work more on analyzing of the political attitudes among the working class, especially organized working class that is within the trade unions. And I think, by the way, that it was a great mistake on the part of the new leadership of the All Poland Trade Union Alliance, who are my friends, personal friends, to take part in the demonstration organized 2 or 3 weeks ago by Donald Tusk in Warsaw against law and justice, because the majority of the people who are members of the trade unions that form the All Poland Trade Union Alliance support law and justice. And, this was an act of mockery of those workers and of their political positions on the part of the leadership of the biggest labor union organization, confederation in Poland. So there are many, many aspects that I could discuss here. But this particular strike, despite the fact that I think it's an interesting and optimistic point, it's really nothing deserving much of a discussion on the background of many complications and many transgressions that have occurred in the Polish labor movement over the last 10 years.
Interesting. Now, talk to us. Talk to us about what has been going on in your home country of Bulgaria. And didn't Boyko Borisov, didn't he have a political comeback, even though the U.S. and the EU propped up a coalition of other parties? And yes, take it from there.
Well, the way you ask the question makes me compels me to first explain certain complications between the clashing imperialist ideas on the part of the U.S. and Germany, or the European Union, if you like. So we can see that in Poland, the upcoming elections in Poland, which are going to occur in October, they are going to be proxy elections between the United States and Germany. And the United States is most likely going to win. So now we're going to have something of a similar nature, but much more comical in Bulgaria. Because Germany indeed not only supports Boyko Borisov, former gangster, person involved in all kinds of other gangsterism. I mean, we were talking about people trafficking, drug trafficking, organizing prostitution. I mean, we're talking about like, oh my God.
I have to repeat the story because it always makes me laugh my ass off. But this boy, but for people who haven't seen, the past coverage of Eastern Europe with Boyan, this Boyko Borisov. So he's this, so he's this, capitalist, gangster. So he was trafficking people with Erdogan, and they were laundering, and they were laundering money. They were laundering money, and they were going to launder it into a Lebanese bank, but it didn't get to the bank because Hezbollah robbed them.
Yeah, on the way. Yeah, like we don't have 100%. We don't have 100% proof of that, but I mean the rumors that have been published back then. I mean that's absolutely ridiculous. And by the way, the guy that was traveling apparently with Boyko Borisov, his former Minister of Finances, one called Dyankov. He's now residing somewhere in the US because apparently he's kind of, it's too dangerous for him to reside in Bulgaria because God knows what kind of deals they have made with what kind of mafia organizations, across the Middle East. And, in the United States, he can feel comfortable, whereas in Bulgaria, it's a little too dangerous for him. So, I mean, there are many comical aspects.
Exactly. I mean, darkly farcical. You're living in a pretty topsy-turvy world when Hezbollah are when Hezbollah are the good guys and Hezbollah sabotages human trafficking, money laundering. But anywho,
anyways, so
go back to explain about Bulgaria.
Yeah, right. So the European Union or Germany, or to be more precise, Angela Merkel and the conservatives, the German conservatives, who are really the beating heart of the European Union. Okay, let's just be honest about that. I mean, they regulate everything and they can decide anything they want and they can override any decision and they don't have to obey any standards, and they can kind of by the force of their behavior, they can set up new standards. For example, now many of the treaties are not really adhered to, which are the core legal basis for the functioning of the European Union. With regards to Poland, because the German government hates the Polish government, so they are trying to exercise repressive measures against Poland, which are also completely contrary to many of the treaties, but no one cares because for as long as Germany says it's okay, it's okay. The German
and of course there's the media wars of Germany. These are the nice liberal conservatives against far right backwards Poland.
Yeah, exactly, and that's also Poland.
Or whatever country is clashing.
You also have the Aryan, real, human forming, culture forming, Europe forming nation, right? Whereas the barbarians, these barbaric tribes from Eastern Europe, Polish, who drink vodka and steal cars, So that's very, so that's also an important element.
Not mine. Just let the audience know.
So that's those German conservatives have not only supported Boyko Borisov, but they have first made him into a politician. I mean, they've actually transformed this petty gangster, petty by international standards, by Bulgarian standards, he was very powerful. They transformed his colleagues, his post-secret police club of gangsters into a political party, which became the linchpin of the Bulgarian, I don't know how to call it, the kind of the Bulgarian transition, okay, which basically led the most demoralized, people who retired from various secret police organizations and stuff like that, to get involved into mafia style activities and then politics and stuff. Well, the German conservatives, and I think I will record a special lecture about it because I don't think anyone has so far explained it on YouTube in details. So and there's evidence how German parties and German foundations sponsored by those parties have put together Boyko Borisov's party and have supported it all along
wow.
until the clash with the Americans. Where does the clash come from? Well, the Americans were very supportive of Boyko Borisov, and the Americans were very supportive of German conservatives, for as long as actually the interests of parts of the American ruling class, which want to take down Russia, started colliding with the interests of the German industrialists, who know that they can only be a factor on international scale if they have access to cheap resources from Russia. In other words, Europe is nothing without Russia. Germany is nothing without Russia, because in Europe you have no raw materials. I mean, you have some coal and some iron, and that's it. But you have no rare metals, you have no oil, you have not even coal. You don't even have enough coal. Poland, which lies on coal, okay, it still had to import coal from Russia. So, I mean, we're talking about gas, of course, also, but many other things, especially rare minerals. That's something which has been underestimated in this discussion about sanctions and stuff like that. By the way, the country that you reside in, Belgium, has been opposing each and every round of sanctions for as long as they contained sanctions on rare metals, jewelry, that kind of stuff. So that, again, people don't know that. That's a very interesting aspect of the whole thing too. So Boyko Borisov, also because he worked with the Germans and he worked with the Russians, servicing the mass sentiment that has always been since the inception of the modern, has always been there since the inception of the modern Bulgarian society, 140 approximately years ago. The Bulgarian society, by Western standards, by how Westerns would talk about it, is pro-Russian. I mean, they have a very brotherly attitude towards Russians, towards Russian culture, towards Russian politics, towards even the Russian political model, okay, where there is this father of the nation, and so this is something that Boyko Borisov, in order to be able to remain in power for 15 years, and in order to be able to exercise near dictatorial, borderline dictatorial model, okay. Because, when I talk about authoritarianism, why do we have to speak about Russia or Belarus all the time? How about we talk about, especially when we're in the European Union, I mean, there is a country in the European Union that has been profoundly authoritarian, okay? And and like, rampantly gangsterist, if it's
but the problem is the people protesting against Borisov. They're not funded by the National Endowment of Plutocracy. I mean, the National Endowment of Democracy.
Yeah. Well, actually, some of them were. Actually, some of them were, because the Americans, they now are hell bent on transforming Bulgaria into their military outpost, because they see that they're losing.
Wait. But before we get into that, okay, so this gangster has been propped up by Germany and in the U.S.
Yeah.
He was he was briefly ousted after popular protests against him. There was scandals.
And the Americans have supported to some extent those protests, because they started to get irritated by Boyko Borisov, because he refused to bow fully to American imperialism, because he knew that if he starts repressing Russian elements in the Russian businesses, Russian culture institutions, the kind of elements in the Bulgarian public sphere that are somehow servicing the sentiment in the society, if he goes against that, or if he if he kind of starts supporting Ukraine in the same manner as Poland or something like that, then he will have serious problems at home. So he didn't want to do that. And he was probably trying to even explain it to the Americans, like, guys, Bulgaria is not, your average, whatever, Poland or something like that, right? I mean, in Bulgaria, you cannot do those things. But then they got even more irritated with him, and they started, trying to get rid of him. So they used the Magnitsky Act, sanctioning his colleagues, some oligarchs which are close to him and stuff like that. And finally, they pressed some buttons within the Bulgarian oligarchic circles who had, been in some kind of problematic relations with Boyko Borisov, in order to start creating new political entities. And we've had 5 rounds of parliamentary elections over the last 2 years precisely because they were not able to find the guys who would be listening to them fully and who would be kind of be their puppets.
And this is where you have political parties like There Is Such Thing as a State, the Anti-Mafia Party, or some weak, toothless leftist party, which NATO socialists.
That kind of stuff. So it's a complicated process. I have to simplify it for the sake of like being able to explain it here. So we've had all those problems, and finally the Americans have found their people. Okay, they finally found their people, but the problem was that after the most recent round of elections on the 2nd of April this year, they were not able to fully rule. They were not able to form a government because there was too little of them in the parliament. So what they said, what they did, the Americans, they nudged them and Boyko Borisov to sit down and start discussing a coalition. But another problem there was that both parties have always hated each other, because the party that is now effectively in coalition with Boyko Borisov's party actually was formed, and that's the legend at least, on the basis of the popular protest against Boyko Borisov back in 2020 and 21. So you have two parties which are mutually exclusive in all aspects you can think about, and they were forced by the American embassy in Sofia to work together. So they have, now when they were put together into one political coalition-like entity, in this particular moment, they stopped representing anyone, because those people who voted for them, they mostly voted for them because they were against the other party. You follow? Like, the people voting for Boyko Borisov, they voted for Boyko Borisov not so much because they love him, but because they hate the other party that the Americans favored. And then the same goes for the other party. It's called, by the way, We Continue the Change. Sorry, there were so many funny names during these 2 years.
And this is an economically liberal, fiscally conservative, blah, 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 blah,
blah. Modern liberals. But very pro-war. That's important.
Very pro-NATO.
Very pro-war, very pro-NATO. So now those two parties had to come together, and everyone knows. The American embassy knows that. The two parties know that. The electorate knows that. Everyone knows that this government is only formed in order to throw Bulgaria into the meat grinder of the Ukrainian war. That's what the government is for, because everyone knows that this government will not last for a long time. Maybe it will last for a long time, but this is going to be the main decision that they have to take, because once this government is over, then those people are never going to come back into politics. It's impossible. No one's going to vote for them. They've betrayed every single vote that they've received. So they are out. It's the last thing that they can do. And right after them, there is the third parliamentary force in Bulgaria, which is the kind of nationalistic right-wing populist kind of, party called the Revival, which is like their whole platform is anti-Americanism, anti-imperialism, anti-NATO. So, this is.
Where's the button that? Because I like that, but where's the stuff which would make me vomit though about them?
Oh, well, there's many. They are just right wingers. What can you expect from them? Like, there's not they, of course, they are against gay marriage. They are against that kind of. But they support free access to abortion on that. So that's like the credit goes where credit's due.
Okay,
but let's not talk about them. I just want to, because we got to finish in like literally 5 minutes. I just want to say that we've had a very complicated, convoluted process of restructuring the Bulgarian establishment, which doesn't represent anyone in the Bulgarian society, but represents the interests of the American embassy in Sofia. And one of the leaked tapes, one of the leaked recordings recently, I think, maybe a month ago or something, one of the sessions of the Politburo of this party, We Continue the Change, okay, they even said openly that we have discussed and scrutinized the choice of leadership of the Bulgarian secret police with the American embassy. So they now, the American ambassador not only appoints the ministers, but even the secret police chiefs in Bulgaria. Wow. Okay, and we know that for a fact, and it was admitted that this recording is true. Like, there's no doubt about anything there. And what is also important, and I want to stress on that fact, is that Bulgaria, the Bulgarian political culture is a completely different political culture than the one that we know from the West. It also refers to Russia, Belarus, many places. Okay, Serbia, for example, although Serbia to a lesser extent. But it's very difficult to organize mass movements in a culture like the Bulgarian culture. Okay, and you will have to take my word for that because I don't have the time to explain that. But despite that, we have so-called marches for freedom and peace and sovereignty, which are organized in small towns, big urban centers all across Bulgaria every month, and they are massive. And the most recent edition, so to say, of that was when people in Sofia gathered in tens of, I think it was 15 or 17,000 people, a lot by Bulgarian standards, a lot. And all of them carried plastic guns and toy guns and stuff like that. And they went to the building of National Assembly and they started throwing those plastic guns at the building, at the central entrance of that building, shouting that we're not going anywhere, we're not joining the war. If you want to go to the war, here are your weapons, and go, like, take the first bus to Ukraine and go. So the Bulgarians are reacting in a very, very healthy manner. The question is now, what is the plan of the American embassy to suppress those protests? And there is also an ongoing referendum initiative, which was organized, by the way, by this Revival Party against adopting the euro in Bulgaria, and they are trying to outlaw this referendum. So they are, doing all kinds of shenanigans with the Constitutional Court or High Court, or someone should declare this unconstitutional, that kind of stuff. But if they proceed to repress this, I think the response from the side of the Bulgarian masses is going to be even more intense. And then the question is, who is going to repress those protests as they get massive? Because they cannot count on the Bulgarian police. They cannot count on the Bulgarian army, because the Bulgarian generals have come up with an open letter before this traitorous government was formed, saying that this person that is planned to become the Minister of Defense is a very problematic person for us. The Bulgarian generals have come up with that letter, with an open letter. And, they still went ahead and appointed this person as the Minister of Defense. So when the protests get massive, what are they going to do? And there are rumors, and I repeat, rumors, we have not seen any evidence of that, that, some thugs from the far-right militias from Ukraine have been secretly deployed to Bulgaria. Again, there's no evidence, okay? But there are rumors, and there have been rumors for weeks now about that they have been deployed in the American bases. There are 4 American military bases in Bulgaria, and that they will be used to support to repress those protests. We'll see.
Wow. How much more time do we have, or do we have to wrap it up?
Yeah, I have to wrap it up here, but I'm happy to record again this week if you.
Well, we're going to have to get you back on the program soon, because we didn't get to my final question, which is, where is the left, the social movements, including EU left reformists? When it comes to that. But before we end the program, this is what I got from the Barricade. I'm subscribed to them, by email. The new Bulgarian government, de facto appointed by the American ambassador in Sofia, is carrying out Washington's imperialist rampage. The parliament is pushed to pass laws The parliament is pushed to pass laws allowing Bulgaria to send weapons and military personnel to Ukraine. The last remaining voices of dissent, such as the famous journalist Peter Volgen, sorry if I'm butchering his name, are facing their programs potentially removed from major media, and many other dangerous things are happening that are completely contrary to the political sentiments of the Bulgarian people. Yeah. This is why, on a cyclical basis, massive demonstrations known as marches for peace and sovereignty take place. Social mobilizations appear to be gaining traction. For more on this, folks, We were joined on this edition of 1+1 with Boyan Stanislavski. People need to check out the Barricade's YouTube channel, subscribe to the Barricade's English website, subscribe to the subscribe to the Barricade and donate generously to their Patreon, because there is lots of shit happening in Bulgaria, which sadly even the best of the left, even the best of the anti-imperialist news media based in the West is completely criminally overlooking.
Yeah, I will only say, I would like to say just one sentence, because I really have to go. But we are facing perhaps, if all those things occur, if Bulgaria is thrown one way or another into this meat grinder of history, that is the Ukrainian war, then, being so weak as a state, as institutions, then we're really facing perhaps the ultimate stage of the Bulgarian modern statehood, and this is really dangerous. This puts a lot of a lot is at stake here. So I think that Bulgaria is extremely important to observe, because if the Bulgarian if the Bulgarian DNA can be kind of broken and overwritten by American imperialism, then I think it's a very bad sign for other countries like, Serbia, Croatia, Belarus. It's very, very, I would say, critical.
Well, we were joined on this edition of 1+1 with Boyan Stanislavski. Boyan, thank you so much for coming back on the program. Yes. Thank you so much for coming back on the program. I will try to have you back on ASAP, because it is fascinating. It's actually very scary what's happening in Bulgaria, and I've not had the time to catch all of the amazing coverage, all the amazing content that the Barricade has been pushing day after day, week after week when it comes to Bulgarian and Polish affairs. So take care until then, and I hope. Power to the Bulgarian people and death to Western imperialism.
Right.
Ciao till then.
Thanks.